today we're going to start kind of developing your skills, the skills that are needed to run your chapter, the leadership skills that you need. We'll also have a bit of time when we'll split off into some smaller groups to focus on the kind of the practical skills that you need in your roles. So we'll be looking at communications and marketing. That's why Charlotte's with us. She's the pro, the expert in the team with this one, so she'll be giving you hints and tips from her work. Jamie's here to look at the kind of fundraising element, so I'm sure Jamie will give you a bit of an introduction later, but Jamie focuses on fundraising within Engineers Like Borders UK. That's what he's responsible for. So again, an expert in this area. And I'll be helping you through the kind of planning for the activities and the different things that you want to do this year. So that process of how do you go from amazing idea to actually doing it. So yeah, we'll be breaking up into smaller spaces to discuss those areas shortly. And we'll be kind of looking at how do you continuously develop within your role, because obviously it's not just about leading your chapter. Whilst you're leading your chapter, you're responsible for the activities you do, but also you'll be learning lots of new skills yourselves and that kind of personal, professional development as you go. So we kind of just want to touch on a little bit of that today. Does that sound good to everyone? Do those sound like good areas to kind of walk through today? Got some nods, some thumbs up. Excellent. So what I would say is you'll notice in our schedule, our last session next week on Thursday, is we have what we're calling the marketplace. And that's kind of an open agenda at this point. So we want to start talking about that today. The concept of this is to kind of find out from you, what are the things that we want to learn? What are the things that we haven't touched on yet that you're maybe concerned about or want to get some more information about? So if there's things that we start touching on today that actually you want more detail on, or you want something different, make a note of it, because we're going to be asking you towards the end of the session to help shape our last session next week. So let's start talking about your role. So what I would like you all to do over in the chat box is just write down what your role is within your chapter. So your chapter's name and your role within your chapter. And that could be, if you are, you haven't done your voting yet, it could be kind of the role that you're thinking of doing. But if you have voted, it could be your firm title at this point. So if you just pop that in the chat, just give us a shape of who we are today and what kind of people we've got in the room. Amazing, thank you. So we've got some event coordinators, outreach coordinators, some presidents, some vice presidents, a few presidents actually, amazing. Perfect, that's really helpful. And that will just help us work out the different areas that we're going to be discussing and what's most applicable to you when we do a little breakout. So a slightly more in-depth question, so that's your role, that's your title. I want you to start thinking about what you're responsible for. So what are the things within your role are you responsible for? Do you know at this point, have you had that conversation? Is it clear or is it slightly undefined? So yeah, does anyone feeling brave enough to say where they're at in this process? Have they got to a point where they've got defined responsibilities, or is it a little bit grey still? So yeah, just a little volunteer to kick us off to talk through this. Would anyone like to volunteer?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Brilliant, thanks Tony.
No worries. So I'm the president of the Glasgow chapter, and to be honest, I think my role is just making sure that everyone's happy, everyone knows what they need to do within their roles, and just being like the support system to help everyone out, and kind of going to and from with emails, and a bit of the behind the scenes kind of thing, making sure that everyone's happy. Is kind of what my role is, I would say, just now.
Brilliant, thank you Tony. So you're kind of supporting other people, making sure that they know what's going on, and kind of overseeing the activities sort of role.
Yeah.
So I saw in the chat we've got some other chairs and other presidents with us. Would you add to what Tony said? Is there anything different to your role that you think that you're responsible for that Tony hasn't touched on? So yeah, just interested to hear if the other presidents and chairs in the room think the same as Tony or anything different. Helen, you're a president over in EWB Cardiff. What do you think?
So I'd agree with Tony on that, but I'd also add that the way I see my role is also I'd be the one representing the chapter when it comes to emailing external initiatives, so like Repair Cafe. I tend to be the one liaising that, and because we don't have a project leader as one of our roles, I'd also be running the project as well and overseeing the outreach.
Okay, so you're also responsible for some specific areas, but you touched on some kind of external representation, so representing the chapter to external bodies when you're contacting them. That's really interesting. Thank you for adding that. Just want to throw it out again, do any of the other presidents or chairs with us today see themselves doing anything different? Is there anything there that they would say that's not what they do in their chapter? You can either pop it in the chat or feel free to raise a hand. Okay, good. All right, so it looks like we've got some consensus there, a lot among the presidents, what they're doing and what they're responsible for. So that's kind of the stuff that we want to unpick a little bit more today, is within your role, what are you responsible for? What are the kind of things that you're needing to do? But also as the committee, what are the kind of activities that you're having to do and how do we help you kind of get there? Especially for some of you who this is the first time you're in the committee and it's the first time doing it. For others, you might have been in your role for a couple of years now, or you've learned from people within your role. So I have a question for you now, and I want you to answer it in the chat box. Would you, in your role in your chapter, consider yourself a leader? So do you think you're a leader within your chapter? I've got an ish from Connor, thank you very much. A few ishes. Brilliant. All right, so we've got a couple of issues there. So Connor, you put ish. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that one?
Hello, is this working?
Yes, you're on, yeah.
I'd say ish because I'm sort of a leader in my sort of area of outreach, so with the department and anything that is to do with like my area, whereas when it comes to set events or projects, it's more down to the people in charge of them and their leadership. So I'd say ish, depending on the topic.
Right, so within your area that you're responsible for, yes, but not across everything is what you're kind of alluding to there, yeah? Brilliant, thank you for sharing that. Amrit, you also were one of the people that said ish. Would you mind elaborating a little bit more there?
Yeah, pretty similar to Connor. I'm kind of there for the events. I'm not so much leading in outreach because that's Connor's thing. So yeah, so as neither of us are like president or vice president, we're not like the big leaders. We're doing our own little thing and trying to fit in and make everything work. Nice.
So you're both kind of agreement there that leaders are in the area that you're focusing on, but also that recognition that there's perhaps some more senior roles that you would look to for leadership in other spaces. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept, that kind of different roles or different responsibilities. And Helen's put a really interesting comment here, saying that they would be seeing themselves more as a mediator and not a dictator. I think that's a really a good thing to draw out, that what does leading really mean? Is it that you're just telling people what to do and when to do it? Or is it more about supporting the development and kind of enabling people to take on the responsibility to do it? So yeah, I think that's a really valid point. Thank you, Helen, for adding that in. So what I would like to say to you, and maybe there's a clue in the title of this training, but that we see you all as leaders. And most certainly we don't see you as the type of people that would go out and dictate, as Helen's alluded to. It's about supporting the development of your chapters. We would see you as the leaders within your community, shaping the direction of your chapter, shaping the learnings that you want to go through. Of course, with the support of each other, with fellow committee members, and of course with the support of the wider Engineers Without Borders UK movement. And that's why we're here today. It's going to help you work out what does a leader really mean in this space. So one of the things that we see that you are responsible for, and Helen kind of touched on this, one of these points earlier, but one of the things we spoke about it last week is ensuring that your chapter activities are contributing to the shared purpose. So we talked about our purpose last week, the kind of different elements that are about our purpose. Can anyone remember the 3 main areas that we're concentrating on with our shared purpose? It's a tricky one. It was about a week ago, just over a week ago, when we started talking about this. Can anyone remember the different areas? You can pop it in the chat. There's no wrong answers. Be brave. Inspire, absolutely. Thank you, Liliana. So inspire is one of our purposes. So inspiring the community, your peers, fellow students, but also others around you, inspiring them that engineering can make a difference, that we can make a change through our engineering. Does anyone remember another term? Excellent. Enable. Perfect. So enabling each other to learn, enabling the kind of teaching and the skills development within your chapter, and then influencing is our final one. So that kind of moving people from this concept of, can engineering really make a difference? We're influencing them to see that they can. We're going to kind of dive into that one a little bit more later, but as the people within your chapter that are responsible for the activities that you do, you're very much responsible for making sure that the activities that you do contribute to this shared purpose. How are they inspiring? How are they influencing? And how are they enabling your community in the kind of area that you're working within? The other thing is representing your members. So Helen touched on this. When you go out, maybe you're doing outreach, maybe you're doing an activity, you're representing your chapter, but you're also representing Engineers Without Borders UK. So if you think, there's a few ways this can happen. It could be when you're going out and doing external activity, you're making sure that the things that you're demonstrating, the things you're talking about, represent the movement. But also, you'll be putting up in situations where you might have to represent all of your members. This has happened a few times that we've heard recently from you, where you've been asked by academics, by people in your engineering faculty, what do you think about this? What do you think about this concept, this kind of new space that we could be going in? And in those situations, you need to remember that you're not just representing yourself and your opinions, but also the opinions of your members. And I can see there's someone else, right, inclusive. And this is really touched on this point, inclusive, because you want to make sure that you're representing all the different ideas fairly, and that you're not being biased towards your own agenda. So that's a really tough one. How do you actually do that? And a key element of this is learning from each other and the others around you. So how are you encouraging people to share their ideas? How are you kind of changing your opinion with people's ideas and concepts? So that kind of, not a dictatorship, very much encouraging people to come with their own ideas and their own solutions, and working with them to do that. Now, it's very easy to say all of these things, but what we're going to be doing today's session is work out how to actually do them. So that's what we're thinking. And here's one of the kind of ideas that we have. It's something that we talk about a lot here at Engineers Without Borders UK. It's the concept of co-designing. And in specifically in the chapter space, we're talking about co-designing activities. So how do you as a chapter decide which activities to focus on? Are you sitting together as a committee members and deciding, okay, we've got a great idea, we're just going to do that idea. We're not going to ask people for their opinions, we're just going to crack on with that. Or are you inviting your members, are you inviting others within your community to contribute to the planning process? Are you assessing and coming back to the purpose and making sure it fits and inviting criticism along the way? This is a really crucial thing. I think it's something that is very much embedded within the Engineers Without Borders UK culture, is inviting people to contribute and to your ideas and make them better. We touched on this, if you can remember, right back at the beginning, session 1, when we started talking about diversity is key, diversity of thought is key. And this is a way we can make sure this is happening by encouraging and including lots of people from the beginning when we start designing and taking shape of our activities for the year. So I want you to kind of take away some thoughts here. So how are you structuring your planning to make sure that these elements are included? How are you agreeing the roles and responsibilities for the activities that you're doing? And how are you inviting others to be involved? So there's a lot to do with the planning and the structure to make this happen. There's a lot to do with deciding when and where you're going to do this. And we'll unpick this a little bit more as well, but just some considerations there. If you have a direction you want your chapter to go in, how are you making sure that you're structuring that planning? How are you making sure that you, amongst everybody involved, they understand their roles and responsibilities within that activity? And how are you inviting people to feedback and evolve that idea? And then this last one, which is develop SMART objectives. So a question to you all now, have you heard of SMART objectives before? Do you know what SMART objectives is and means? Pop it in the chat if you know what SMART stands for. It's okay if you don't, it's not a trick question. All right, let's take it one letter at a time. So does anyone want to take a guess at what the S is? What do you think an S is when you're creating an objective? How would you structure your objective? What could S stand for? Pop it in the chat. Specific, bang on, thank you very much. So be specific, be very clear in your objective. What are we trying to achieve? Don't be broad, be very clear. All right, M. So we've worked out what are the specifics of what we're doing. What could the M be? If you think about how are we going to work out, oh, there we go, thank you, Jamie. So how are we going to work out that we've achieved our objectives? Well, we need something to measure against. So we need an objective that is measurable. So that's being specific, being measurable. The A, and the A, I think, does change a little bit depending on which acronym you're using. But the main thing, achievable, that's the one I've got down. So make sure it's achievable. If you can't do your objective, then you're setting yourself up to fail. So make sure it's achievable within your resources, within your time frame. Very important. R. So R is very much connected to what I spoke about earlier about being relevant to the purposes, and I just said the word by explaining it. So it's relevant. Make sure it's relevant to what you're trying to achieve, and so relevant to our shared purpose. It's like a checkpoint. Is it relevant to what we're trying to do as a whole chapter? And then the last one, which is T, very linked to being measurable. Anyone got an idea of what the T? Time, you got it, Helen. So it's being time bound. So you've got a clear deadline, a clear area when we want to achieve the objective. So we've got being specific, being measurable, being achievable, being relevant, and being time bound. And that's how you structure your objective. We're going to kind of unpick what that means in the kind of concept of planning in one of the sessions, one of the breakout sessions. But we've also got a worksheet to help you go from big, broad concept to very specific objective that we want to do that will help, which we'll share with you all after this session. So I now want to switch gears a little bit. One of the things that we've touched on already is how what you're doing, and a big part of what you're doing is representing Engineers Without Borders UK. You're representing your chapters, you're representing the whole movement. You're kind of responsible for making sure that the things that you do are aligned with our purpose, but also aligned with our messaging. And we're going to hand over to Lottie now to talk to us a little bit more about what that all means, the messaging and the kind of how do we represent Engineers Without Borders UK. So yeah, inviting Lottie.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Kerry. So as Kerry's just saying there, not only might you be representing your chapter at events in person, but also across your online presence and any of the resources which you produce. So if we don't mind going to the next slide, Kerry, thank you. So often the power of a united movement is not only emphasised by the ability to recognise it visually, and that is the impact of effective branding. But branding is not just about the ability to recognise a logo from the side of a road or while scrolling through Instagram. It is also about knowing the organisation's purpose, audience, and mission instantly. That is why consistent and strong branding is so important. We want Engineers Without Borders UK to become widely recognisable, resulting in not only our logo being instantly identifiable, but most importantly, our purpose, audience, and mission being known. This not only helps raise the profile of the organisation on a national scale, but it also provides those who take part in, support, or donate to our work with confidence, therefore ensuring our impact has a wider effective reach. Next slide, Kerry, thank you. If you leave the training series throughout August, remembering one thing, it is so important that you remember this. If you are in Glasgow or in our central office in London or based down in Cornwall, we should all be singing from the same song sheets and we should be clear on our purpose. So this is really, really crucial to how you represent the organisation. So to look at this, we want to ensure we have a strong brand identity. So if we look on the next slide, thank you, that is working with some of these following cohesive elements. These will be looked at in more detail if you are in the marketing and communications breakout group, but just briefly, it's important for you to consider your tone of voice in your communications. So although we have some guidelines for how you would do this to really replicate and try to identify with our tone of voice, you may have your own personality as a chapter, and that's really important so people can really engage with you. Colour palettes and the colours that you're using across your resources are really important. For instance, the reason you recognise the big McDonald's logo, not only because of the M, because of that golden yellow. If it was in blue, you might look at it twice and wonder actually where that logo is and what it's related to. So colours are really important. Similarly, this is really important with fonts. Again, as we're talking about using your logos, so you will get given your logos with your university names attached to them. And this is really important. It not only identifies your work separate to us to ensure that you're getting the recognition you deserve, and really highlights the work that you're doing within your university. So it's really important that you use these effectively. And that goes the same for names. It's really important that you use your names with your university featured in it. And again, just to make sure that your work is being highlighted effectively. Subject matter. This is really important that you consider what would be relevant for your audience, for your members, and what they're interested in. So that may not just be engineering based. I think we'll be looking more widely within the breakout group, but actually that wider audience of students who are engaged in sustainability more widely, and really looking at the subject matter that is quite broad, and you would want to start engaging with some of those resources which already exist. And images and photography, they play a huge role in brand identity. Throughout all these series, these sessions in this series, you would have seen visuals in all of the PowerPoints. These have all been curated to make a certain impact and to be in line with the brand and to really uphold what we are trying to achieve. So these will really make an impact in how you represent your chapter. Thank you very much, Kerry.
Great, thanks Lottie. And you know, as we said earlier, we're going to go into some smaller groups. So for those of you that are more involved with kind of making sure that you're communicating and representing your chapter, you'll have some time to kind of go through that one in a lot more detail. So I just want to touch on a little bit here on why it's really important to share with each other and share with different chapters what's going on. And it's really all about being able to learn from each other's experiences. So from those around you, are there people that used to be in your committee role from last year or the year before that you can go to and turn to for support when you're trying to work out what to do? If there's a tricky situation, who are the key people around you that you would go to for some advice? Could it be other presidents from other chapters, other outreach coordinators from other chapters to find out how they're doing things? Or is it other people within your university? Could it be other societies? Every society has committees, usually quite similar structure to your committee. Could you go and talk to other people in similar roles to find out what's going on, or alumni that have been in your roles previously? The other thing that is incredibly important for your own development is to invite people to provide you feedback. We do this as an organisation, we do this a lot, and we've been inviting you to feedback on our sessions as we go. Ask people to challenge what you're doing, not just provide positive feedback, although that's very helpful when you're not sure, but also invite people to challenge you, invite people to help you improve what you're doing for future. And you could do that in a number of different ways. You could invite it within a meeting or one-on-one if you want some direct feedback. But also when you're working with large groups of people, when you're working with your members, how are you inviting them to feedback on the event that you've just done, especially if it's something new? Could it be a feedback form? If you take the example of outreach, we ask the students to write down on a little post-it note sometimes what they thought of the session, and we might not frame it in feedback terminology, but that provides us a snapshot of how things have gone and any improvements we need to do for the next one. So this next bullet point sometimes can be very hard for us. It's admit when you don't know the answer. And that can make a little bit more kind of a vulnerable state. You're having to say that you're not sure, you're not familiar with the concept, or that you've made a mistake perhaps. But it's crucial, because if you just kind of make it up on the spot and it's completely wrong, then the confidence that they have in you might be disrupted. And then that kind of brings me to my final point, is share when things go wrong. When things haven't gone quite right, let people know. It helps with other people's learning and development. It might influence how they're going to be doing things. And I definitely encourage you to do this amongst yourselves. So as you know, we're moving into this world which is a little bit uncertain, we're going to have to do things differently over the next few months with our activities. Share when things are going wrong with the other chapters, share why that went wrong, but also celebrate successes. So share when things are going well. That way other people can learn from those kind of activities. It's really important to make sure we're continuously communicating. So now we're going to do just this. We're going to go into some small groups and kind of talk about these 3 different areas. We Daphne's been kind of working in the background to get us some groups that are relevant to kind of the activities that you're doing this year, and we're going to be able to kind of share with each other what's going on, but also get a little bit of teaching. So we've got about 25 minutes for this, and hopefully we're going to be magically taken to some different rooms. Obviously we've all just kind of been in different spaces talking about different things, so what I'd like to ask you all is kind of a little bit of sharing what you did in your room. What are the kind of things that you spoke about in your space? Just so if we weren't able to join your space, we get to hear what you did. So Jamie, well, first of all, is anyone that was in Jamie's room that wouldn't mind just doing a little bit of a summary of what you talked about and the kind of things that you learned or discussed in Jamie's room?
Come on, team. I think just to be saying on the slightly unfair or potentially bad marks for me as a facilitator, I didn't ask them to write any notes. Very much that discussion side of things.
That's okay. I'm putting everyone on the spot right now. We didn't plan this. So yeah, anybody from Jamie's room. Otherwise, Jamie will pick on you. So it's either a volunteer or you get picked on.
We covered fundraising. And it was actually really helpful because I haven't really done much fundraising before, apart from like doing bake sales. But yeah, we just discussed how like our main focus when we're fundraising is just to talk about why our chapter exists and like what is our main purpose, and that's just going over like just saying how there is no planet B, and so we should really care for the planet we have at the moment, and that's why like it's important what we're doing. And then like for my society anyway, like because we might have like a few local engineering companies near us, like just to create a template so we can like easily send off those of emails to ask for like any like money to help with our fundraising and outreach.
Thank you for volunteering. Yeah, it sounds like you had a really interesting conversation about how do we raise funds to do the kind of activities that we want to do. Did you guys touch on a kind of fundraising for the movement at all, kind of how we could fundraise for Engineers Without Borders and the kind of activities that we want to do as a whole? Did we touch on that one, Jamie? Did we? That's right. I think we're going to
yeah, we did. We talked about how the use that fundraising is a team effort. So the fact that if we are going to fundraise or say, for example, sending out those emails that Liliana was mentioning there, but actually using us as an organisation to say, look, yes, we have spoken to Joe Blogs at X, Y, and Z. This is definitely the person to speak to, or we say we haven't, but please do let us know if that goes well. So it's very much kind of centralising the whole thing and ensuring that, seeing the fact that we are a whole movement and it's not just about the chapter there, but it's about the whole team effort.
Excellent.
Would you say that was right, guys? Giazi, would you say that was right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely what we sort of mentioned in the last bit of sort of linking with, have we spoken to them before? Okay, we can then build on that initial contact on a chapter level to grow it to potentially a national level.
Great. I mean, it sounds like you had a really constructive conversation there about, first of all, kind of the things that you can do in your own space, but also how we can grow that to help the whole movement and everything that we're trying to achieve. I think just kind of touching on what you were saying there, Jamie, like perhaps our new Slack space is a great area to be able to share those kind of wins and those conversations that we're having with some external people. So I definitely encourage you, if you've had a really good conversation with someone, or you've been able to get some funding in, whether that's through a fundraiser at your university or external, like we all want to hear about it because maybe you've got an idea that we can replicate somewhere else. So yeah, share it on Slack. That'd be really helpful for everybody. All right, let's move over to what happened in the comms and marketing space. I'm sure it was very creative. Have we got anyone who was with the comms and marketing group that would like to volunteer just to talk about what you discussed?
Any volunteers, team? And there was a lot of information. We got through a lot in a very short space of time.
Yeah, I don't mind talking about it a wee bit.
Thanks, Tony.
No worries. So we were talking about what would a good logo be. Well, obviously we're given our logo, but how we use that to the best ensure that we're representing our own chapter and also the organisation EWB UK. And so obviously if we're using the white logo, then we should maybe be thinking about a green background and then vice versa. We also spoke about fonts, and so we are provided fonts that best kind of or tie in with EWB UK, and so it's better for us to use them to kind of work with, again, following on from what we spoke about just there, a team effort, so that we're kind of working together. We also kind of look through different pictures and images that we kind of decided what would be best suited to our chapters and maybe what don't really show diversity or inclusivity, and so we should kind of maybe think more carefully about how we choose images, and that is, and again we spoke about the packages that are available and things at the end that we can use.
Yeah,
You
absolutely,
guys did
Tony.
do a lot of content, didn't you? Go on, sorry, go on. What were you going to add?
Absolutely, we did indeed. Thank you very much. We also touched a little bit on kind of in terms of content creation, kind of do's and don'ts, common pitfalls as well, which are kind of good to cover. So anyone who would be involved in communication within their chapter, that would be great to touch on in that kind of marketplace space as well, because they're handy tips.
Fantastic, thank you. And Tony, you touched on this, the kind of resources that are available to support you through this process. There are a lot of resources available, and we'll make sure after this session that they're all shared. The links for those are all shared on the Slack channel and on email. Please do let me know if you haven't been able to access the Slack channel, and just pop it in the chat and we'll make sure that you get it before the end of the day, because there'll be lots of content on there for you to look through. So lastly, but by no means least, my group, when we were talking about kind of management and kind of that process of managing activities and project management skills. So would anyone like to volunteer from my group to kind of share what we discussed?
I'd be happy to. Is my microphone on?
So are you volunteering?
Yeah, I'm happy to volunteer.
Perfect, thank you, Helen.
So we were talking about how we come up with ideas and then make them happen. So it was more of you come up with sort of when you're thinking of doing these activities, and then you come up with what you want to do. We went into it quite in a lot of depth, but it was also making sure that whoever you're planning it with knows what their responsibilities are. So it's not just all left on you as a project manager to do everything, but making it clear whose roles and responsibilities are what, which is, I think that was the most important thing I took away from that.
Thanks, Helen. So we definitely touched on the kind of clarity on who's doing what, but also how do you go from lots of ideas to, okay, this is what we're doing, and using the kind of things that we've touched on, like our shared purpose and the kind of specific objectives that you want to do in your chapter to help whittle that down. And we had a really good example of what Strathclyde have been doing to kind of go through that process. So I think if you're struggling with this one, I definitely point you to kind of go and speak to Chiara over on Slack later, give her a little message, because they've gone through quite an in-depth process over the summer to kind of whittle these ideas down, starting off with a huge amount of ideas and working out which are the things that we want to do. So yeah, if you're struggling with that one, again, pop it on Slack and definitely direct you to kind of support each other with that process and learn from one another. So it sounds like there's a lot of different things that we spoke about today, and I really hope you found that useful in kind of going in a bit more depth on one specific subject. What we're going to be doing next in this kind of last 15 minutes or so is just talk about what we want to do next week. So we have this session I mentioned earlier, which we're calling the marketplace, that kind of time where we're leaving a little bit informal so people can decide what you would like us to kind of go through, what would be helpful for us to cover. So if there's anything that you've been thinking during this session, I wish we talked about this, or I'm really not sure how to do this at my chapter, or there was a great idea, I want to hear more about that, kind of just want to hear from you all at the moment, where we're at in this process and what kind of things we want to focus on next week in our last 2 sessions together. So you can unmute and kind of speak out, or you can use the chat just to kind of share what you want. I think we already had something from the comms and marketing space, something else in addition that we want to talk about. So if you can pop that one in the chat as well, just so we can all see and make sure that's what we want to talk about. Just give you a couple minutes to write down your thoughts on other areas you want to focus on next week. If you're typing away right now, just keep going, and we'll see it. And if we can add the one that was mentioned earlier from the comms and marketing, just so we have it captured, would be very helpful. If you're not sure, but you kind of think of an idea over the next few days, you can also, let us know, ping us a message on Slack to let us know what you're thinking, what might be helpful. I've got a question for you all. We've been talking a little bit about outreach during a few of our sessions now, and the kind of uncertainty around outreach. Would it be helpful to allow some space next week on Thursday to kind of look at that slightly more specifically, and do a bit more idea generation of outreach? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if that is something you want to do, or if it's not something you want to do. Thumbs up from Connor and Helen. Okay, 3 thumbs up now.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, we've got quite a few thumbs up on that one. So a little bit of focus on a bit of idea generation. How do we work out outreach? The other thing we haven't really spoken a little bit too much about during this time is designathons. Is designathons something we're worried about, how to deliver those kind of long-term design challenges? Got something coming through here is looking at visibility of virtual events. How can we actually, I think that's a really good one, that distance. Okay, so how do we kind of achieve this virtual event stuff? I think that's a really good suggestion there. Is that something we want to focus on? So watch just in the chat there. We've got some thumbs up.
Yeah.
And then we've got something from Helen that's saying, concerned on how to get a physical outcome to a project if we can't all meet and build it. I think that's a really good one, Helen. So if you've got a project, which usually you would kind of go in a workshop, I guess, and kind of make something, what does that really mean? What can we do this year? So maybe it's a conversation of kind of changing some of the objectives that we want to do within our projects, different ways of creating projects. Does that sound like, so we're having a bit of a focus on promotion and kind of get that virtual event side of things covered, something on outreach and something on projects, so like that kind of physical element of projects. Do those 3 things sound like a good 3 things to focus on, or does anyone else want to throw something in the mix? Put a thumbs down if you're not liking these ideas. It's good. We've got thumbs up. So okay, we'll pop those ideas onto Slack just to kind of help you think. And if you've got anything alternative, like I don't want to put what we're doing in Thursday locked into stone right now. We have a week to go. So if there's something else that when you kind of go back and talk to your committee members or other chapter members and they have another idea, another challenge that you have, let us know and we'll see how we kind of fit it in. But I think those are 3 really good, solid areas so far. So thank you so much for sharing. So next week, we have got 2 more sessions. Our first session, I'm just going to bring it up. Hold on. Great. So next week, I haven't written what we're doing next week on my slides, so I'll just tell you. Sorry about that. So on Tuesday, we're going to be looking at engineering in this kind of development space. So what can we do as engineers and engineering? What kind of impact can we have on development? What does development mean? What does this kind of concept mean? We're going to kind of go a little bit into the history of the international development space and kind of throwing out some big questions of, is international development and the kind of historic concept of international development still relevant in today's climate? So we're going to be doing a bit of a workshop on Tuesday to unpack that concept. And then on Thursday, we've got our 3 areas of focus now. So kind of looking at how do we do outreach in this new space, a bit of idea generation, something about kind of focusing on kind of that virtual promotion and trying to get engagement in this virtual space, and then something about kind of that practical element of projects, how do we continue. So that's next week. between then and now, absolutely continue conversations on Slack, and we'll put all of this information on Slack. As always, I'll stick around for the next couple of minutes at the end of this session if you want to stick around for any questions or questions to each other. It doesn't need to be a question to me at this point. But thank you so much for joining us today. As I said earlier, inviting feedback is absolutely essential. So if you have any feedback on today's session, anything that you didn't quite get that you thought you were going to get, please let me know, and we'll be sticking around for the next couple of minutes. So thank you for joining us today.